Every 4 years, nations descend upon a designated land to attempt to win football's eternal prize, the World Cup. From the now 48 challengers of the modern World Cup, only one can be victorious. Such is the cruel nature of knockout football. Many nations go into the tournament believing they can win, but even some of the best, most talented nations couldn't make it happen. And it got me wondering, what does it take to win the World Cup? As of the 2022 World Cup, 80 nations have taken part in the World Cup, but only 8 have been victorious at least once. So what can we take from the previous winners of the tournament, and how can today's nations utilise the lessons of previous winners now? Ladies and gentlemen, we are delving back through the archives once again to take a look at a lesson from every World Cup winner. 1930 was first up, the inaugural World Cup held in Uruguay, which at the time was a footballing powerhouse. They had won back-to-back football titles at the 1924 and the 1928 Olympics, respectively, but they were not the favourites going into the tournament. Both Argentina and Brazil were perceived as having better squads. But this is where our first lesson comes in of utilising national spirit. Being the host nation, Uruguay could do that in abundance. Uruguay were awarded the World Cup as they were celebrating 100 years of independence, and support for their national team was rife, with almost 80,000 in attendance for the final. The team tapped into national pride, and as well as the quality they had within, were able to win the first World Cup. This lesson is likely to be a lot harder to utilise these days, but if the opportunity is there, you need to take it. That's what fascist Italy did. Mussolini was desperate to host the World Cup and would use every trick in the book to make it happen. Rumours of under-the-table payments had more than enough smoke to them. Once the football kicked off, Italy was certainly strong, but there was definitely more than just a tinge of refereeing bias. In the final, Azzurri faced Czechoslovakia, who coincidentally happened to have aligned with the Soviet Union on the same day, prompting a fascism versus communism World Cup final. Italy came from behind in the game to defeat the Czechs by 2-1, and 4 days later, Hitler visited Mussolini for the first time in Venice. Soon, political intervention would do more than just winning the World Cup. The lesson here in the 1938 World Cup is a complete juxtaposition to the previous one, yet it applies to Italy again here too. Now, anyone familiar with a little war named WWII will know that the world was a little precarious in 1938. In fact, there were meant to be 16 teams at this tournament, yet Austria seemed to just disappear as a political entity. In terms of the Italy squad though, only 4 remained from the previous World Cup. Mussolini by this point had a lot more to worry about than the Italian national team, although he did infamously send them a telegram of win or die, which is still debated by historians as whether the threat was credible or not. But they needn't worry anyway, Italy did win, ignoring the noise from the outside world and just concentrating on the job at hand. They coasted to victory in the end with a 4-2 victory over Hungary. The noise was well and truly blocked. After a break of 12 years due to some world events, the World Cup returned, and this time the hosts were Brazil. Not only were they hosts, but they were also immensely confident ones at that. The Maracanã was purposely built for the tournament, and when the final came between Brazil and Uruguay, 174,000 people turned up according to FIFA, but truthfully it was probably closer to 200,000. Ahead of the match, O Mundo carried the headline, "These are world champions." Jules Rimet, FIFA president, already had a speech written in Portuguese for when they inevitably won. Everyone just assumed that Uruguay would roll over. However, they didn't appear to get that memo, and in extraordinary circumstances, they won the match by 2-1. It's said only 3 people have ever silenced the Maracanã: the Pope, Frank Sinatra, and match winner Alcides Giga. Party poopers indeed. The lesson of the 1954 World Cup is the importance of togetherness. Going into the '54 World Cup, West German players were required to hold down a proper job alongside playing football. Favourites Hungary, on the other hand, were unbeaten in 4 years and had stars such as Puskás. When the two met in the final, once again it was expected that Hungary would comfortably defeat the West Germans as they had done in the group stage 8-3. However, remarkably, the fractured nation managed to come from 2-0 down to win 3-2 against one of the best sides that never won the World Cup. In a nation that had lost its identity since the Second World War, these group of players' togetherness and spirit allowed the Eagle to rise again. This lesson is perhaps one of the most obvious of the lot, given who we're talking about. In 1958, a 17-year-old Pelé took the world by storm. After Brazil's humiliation in 1950, they were searching for any way in which to win. Although Pelé actually started rather quietly in this World Cup, at least in terms of output, it wasn't until the match winner against Wales that saw his tournament really kickstart. A hat-trick followed against a masterful France side that had just Fontaine leading their line. In the final against Sweden, a brace followed in a 5-2 victory. So impressed was the crowd that even the Swedish fans were applauding this young man. In fact, King Gustav of Sweden personally came down to the pitch to shake the young man's hand. So much for You'll Never Win Anything with Kids. After finally securing the Jules Rimet crown, Brazil went in search of a second in the following World Cup. The element of surprise, both tactically and in the arrival of Pelé, was gone, but they were still confident and consolidated that they could find victory. However, this looked in tatters when the magician Pelé pulled up against Czechoslovakia in just the second group match. Fortunately, his replacement Amarildo scored a brace in the following match. But the real star of the show was Garrincha, who once Pelé got injured came alive in the tournament, finishing as joint Golden Boot winner. Turns out having a lot of good players is very helpful towards winning a World Cup. When the World Cup finally made its way to Blighty in '66, you'd be forgiven for not thinking that England had much of a chance. They had little international pedigree and Brazil was ravenous in their pursuit for their third straight crown. So what could Alf Ramsey utilise to win the tournament? Well, firstly, the referees seemed kind of susceptible to being influenced by the crowd, but putting that to one side, England were incredibly professional at this tournament. The players agreed to stop the pints for the tournament. Well, most of them, but jokes aside, they were the fittest team at the tourney. It's unsurprising that 70% of their goals came in the last 30 minutes of each game. Member of the 66 squad, George Cohen, explains how at the end of the 90 in the final versus West Germany, manager Alf Ramsey pointed to the German players and said, "Look, they're finished," and made his men stand up to prove how fit they were. Professionalism pays. Mexico 1970 rolled around next and the winning team installed the most simple basic tactics, but they were the most effective. Brazil just went for it. They steamrolled through their opposition, just believing in their overall quality that could get them through it. 19 goals in 6 matches, including 4 in the final against Italy. Pelé, Jairzinho and Gerson, all magnificent. 1974 saw the World Cup head to West Germany, but there was another name on the lips of the spectators. The Netherlands were perceived as having one of the greatest teams of all time, with Johan Cruyff being the spearhead. It was in the group stage versus Sweden that he would first show off his infamous now Cruyff turn. They were ruthless. West Germany, on the other hand, were sluggish, defeated by East Germany in the only match between the two ever played, but did grow as the tournament went along. When the two met in the final, the neutrals were mostly supporting the Netherlands due to the glorious football they played. But as the lesson states, it's not a beauty contest, and the winner was the most pragmatic, and that was West Germany, who won 2-1. Argentina 1978. perhaps the most controversial World Cup of all time. In short, Argentina had undergone a military coup of its democratically elected government just 2 years before the tournament. As many as 30,000 people were killed in state-sponsored terrorism during the dirty war that saw the new government hunt down dissidents who resided on the left wing politically. In terms of the World Cup, it seemed from the outside looking in that Argentina performing well at the tournament was a necessity to prove they were politically legitimate, and thus any form of corruption would be used to ensure it. In the end, they reached the final with many favourable refereeing decisions and the scandal of Peru. In the match versus Peru, Argentina had to win the game by 4 goals to reach the final, and did so by winning 6-0 instead. But there are many rumours of alleged corruption on this match. We'll leave it here until we cover this story in greater detail another day. But all you need to know is Argentina won the tournament, beating the Netherlands 3-1. The World Cup headed to Spain in 1982 as the tournament expanded to host 24 nations. The lesson in this one is that you must trust the man at the helm. For Italy, it was Enzo Bearzot who took the bold decision to bring Paolo Rossi back into the Italy fold for the World Cup. He was banned for 2 years in 1980 for alleged match fixing and had only played 3 competitive matches before the World Cup begun. Journalists lamented that the striker was in poor shape ahead of the tournament. It only got worse too, as Rossi started all 3 group matches in which Rossi failed to score and Italy drew every game, somehow sneaking through in 2nd place. Yet remarkably, in the crucial 2nd group stage match against Brazil, Rossi showed up in abundance. A hat-trick against the perceived best team in the competition saw Italy progress and Brazil go home. In the semis against Poland, Italy won by 2-0, with both goals again coming from Rossi. And in the final against Germany, who else to open the scoring but Rossi once again, as they went on to win the match 3-1. Italy had seemingly won the tournament out of nowhere. Rossi had won the Golden Ball and he also won the Golden Boot, and the journalists were made to eat their words. It turns out the coach might know a thing or two. From trusting the right coach to picking the right captain this time around, the World Cup returned to Mexico in 1986, the first time a country had hosted the tournament twice. Carlos Bilardo was leading Argentina. In one of his first acts as manager, he took the bold decision to strip World Cup winning defender Daniel Passarella as the captain and instead handed it to Maradona. This decision led to Passarella walking out on the squad just days before the start of the World Cup and made Argentina even less fancied for the tournament than they already were. However, the responsibility entrusted to Maradona made him thrive. Scoring 5 goals and assisting 5 more during the competition, the Golden Ball was bestowed upon him by virtue from the voting members. Yes, this was the World Cup that Maradona did the infamous hand of God, but putting that aside, for one moment, it's clear that the decision to hand him the captaincy, to entrust him with that responsibility, had proven to be unequivocally the right one. In 1990, one nation had been plotting their revenge for the last 4 years. Argentina were champions in 1986 ahead of West Germany, which set them on a collision course to getting their revenge. They weren't the most exciting to watch, but they had steely determination that was no better underpinned than by legendary midfielder Lothar Matthäus. The German was box to box, all action, picking up 4 goals and being just as vital in the defensive area too. And it was here where Germany would meet the foe that denied them last time out, Argentina. The final itself was not a classic. Argentina seemingly played themselves out by the time of making it, looking depleted throughout the squad. The game was decided by an 85th minute spot kick, which saw Germany win the match 1-0. It was rugged, but Franz Beckenbauer's men had atoned for their errors 4 years earlier. This lesson from the champion nation of 1994 would perhaps be expected from an England or a Germany type nation. But no, this one comes from the nation of Samba, of Joga Bonito, of Pelé and Jairzinho and Garrincha. This was no ordinary Brazil side. which actually meant this was a rather ordinary Brazil side. Perhaps that's a bit harsh. The squad did have Romario and Dunga amongst their ranks, but still this was far from what we had come to expect from a Brazil side. In some respects, it's almost as if the World Cup passed Brazil by. Barring the 3-2 win over the Netherlands, wins have been straightforward and expected. And when the final came against Italy, stoicism won it. Brazil were the better side on the balance of play, but it took penalties to separate the two sides. Fortunately, Baresi and Baggio seemed to buckle under the pressure, and a very uncharacteristic Brazil won the tournament. In 1998, the World Cup was back in a nation that many felt was underperforming on the international stage, and that was France. The country had missed both the 1990 and 1994 World Cup through failing to qualify, although they had done reasonably well in the 1996 Euros, where they finished as semi-finalists. In the group stage of their home World Cup, the nation looked refreshed and they were firing. 3 wins from 3, although dynamic midfielder Zinedine Zidane had made a silly error against Saudi Arabia, which saw him sent off and missing the next 2 matches. France continued to bowl their way through the knockout stages, although it did take extra time to beat Paraguay and penalties to beat Italy. In the semi-final against surprise package Croatia, Lilian Thuram made a dreadful error which saw Davor Šuker open the scoring. He made up for it quickly though, scoring an equaliser just a minute later and providing the winner too, in his only 2 goals he ever scored for his country. And in the final versus Brazil, Zidane atoned for his previous errors too, scoring a brace en route to a 3-0 victory. The tournament saw redemption for Zidane and for Thuram, for the manager and for France as a whole, who had been letting their country down for a long time. It's never too late to make amends. As the millennium passed, the World Cup ventured into Asia for the first time with our first dual hosts, Japan and South Korea, with many of the pre-tournament favourites going down in the group stage, namely Argentina and France and Portugal. Many nations had a better opportunity than usual to win the tournament. Saying this, Brazil didn't seem to mind who they played. They were brimming with confidence and firing past everyone. With the devastating duo of Ronaldo and Rivaldo, no nation could tangle with them. In the final over Germany, it felt almost inevitable. Ronaldo lined up a brace, and between the pair, they notched 13 goals. Roberto Carlos and Ronaldinho were also impressive in 02, but ultimately goal scorers are 1 in a million, or maybe 2 in the case of Brazil. In 2006, the World Cup was on the march again, this time in reunified Germany. The hosts were much fancied after winning their 3 group matches. Unfortunately for Germany, Italy were quite good too and had a squad brimming with talent. So much talent, in fact, that manager Marcello Lippi used every member of his squad during Italy's campaign, helping cultivate a fantastic team atmosphere. When the two met in the semi-finals, a close battle ensued. 118 minutes passed with no goals, until Grosso found a winner and Del Piero put the game to bed. Then in the final, it took penalties to find a winner, with the game poised at 1-1 and Zidane in the dressing room having headbutted Materazzi in extraordinary circumstances. From the spot though, Italy were ruthless, scoring every single penalty and making themselves 4-time winners of the tournament. What made this tournament win particularly impressive was Italy using a previous lesson too, which was blocking out the noise. At the time, the scandal of match fixing was in full force in Italy, which saw many Italian players banned and Juventus relegated from Serie A. The blocking out of the noise and the generosity of Lippi's minutes saw Italy win gold. The lesson in 2010 was simple but effective. Spain were in their absolute pomp when this tournament came calling. Spanish football was dominating domestically and the nation itself had won Euro 2008 comfortably, so it was unsurprising when they were lauded as pre-tournament favourites. However, disaster appeared to strike early on when they were defeated 1-0 by lesser side Switzerland. Many nations may have panicked here, especially over the perceived lack of firepower within their strikers, but Del Bosque kept his cool. Spain went on to victory with a series of 1-0 knockout victories, showing the importance of keeping a level head amidst the tension of the World Cup. In 2014, the World Cup was back in the nation of the most successful international football team. As such, Brazil, as well as Spain, who had won the last 3 international tournaments, not including the Confederations Cup, were viewed as the teams to beat. However, both collapsed at key moments. Spain collapsed in their opening match against the Netherlands, losing 5-1, spelling the end of their dominance. Brazil, on the other hand, collapsed in the semi-finals, losing by a mammoth 7-1 to eventual winners Germany. But how did the Germans do it? In my opinion, ruthless pragmatism. The team just knew what it took to get the job done. They had a centre-back in Howardez at left-back, Muller and Klose as obvious goal-scoring threats, hard workers in Lahm, Khedira, Kroos, etc., and a little wizard going by Mesut Ozil. In 2018, Moscow was the destination of the World Cup. France went into the tournament as one of the favourites given the immense amount of talent at their disposal. They had been beaten finalists at Euro 2016 and were desperate to make up for it. What was underpinning the riches of France's squad though? Efficiency, as led by Didier Deschamps. Umtiti, Varane and Kante acted as a triangle of defensive solidity. Pogba was thus unlocked, allowing him to marauder up and down the pitch. Griezmann and Mbappe would interchange at a canter to find space, with Giroud as the focal point of the attack to hold everything up. And then on the left, perhaps surprisingly, was Blaise Matuidi. His work rate was invaluable to making this French side tick. With that, the recipe proved successful as France blitzed their way through the competition, eventually beating finalist Croatia 4-2. It's here where we come to our final lesson. A simple one, but a necessary one in the pursuit of winning the World Cup. Lionel Messi is one of the greatest, if not the greatest player to have ever played, yet for a long time it looked like the World Cup, the grandest prize in football, would elude him. Going into the tournament, Argentina were not unfancied, but certainly not favourites either. They had a young coach and an ageing squad, and certainly in the case of Messi, it looked like his best days were behind him. In fact, even at certain points in his career, it looked like the great player had begun to have doubts himself. After the 2016 Copa America final defeat to Chile, Messi announced his retirement from international football aged just 29. He was eventually persuaded out of retirement in time for the 2018 World Cup, where again, Argentina were unsuccessful. And just when it appeared all over, 2022 came along, and the patience was rewarded. Messi and Argentina finally got their hands on the crown once again, as the world saw some of the most iconic images of all time. So there we have it, a lesson from each winner of every World Cup from inception all the one to the one in the Middle East last year. Let me know what lesson you think is most important, or perhaps let me know a lesson that wasn't included here that you think should be. But for now, thank you for watching.